Welcome to this live stream on color management, and the main thing I want to cover is just the idea, the concept of color management, and then I'm going to bring you through two different ways of setting this up within Davinci Resolve. Now there are other color grading applications that it can be used in. Color management isn't just a Davinci Resolve thing, but Davinci Resolve is the sort of main color grading software that most people would be using. So I think it's most helpful going through the process or the concept in Davinci Resolve, and the same concept can apply in all these other grading applications. So when it comes to color management, the first thing to note is that it's not color grading. So it's a foundational workflow to set us up for color grading later at a later stage. So it's more a preparing your footage and getting your footage into the right sort of frame so that you can color grade consistently and to the best of your ability, and using the most of what how the footage was captured, using most of the information that it received when it captured the footage, and then delivering it in an appropriate way for the delivery, whatever way that you need to deliver that. So there's two things we need to know. Firstly, first thing we need to know is how was the footage captured. So what was it captured on, what's the codec, and what was the gamma. So was it log, was it a RAC 709, and then we need to know how we're delivering. So there might be multiple deliveries requested from the client, but we need to know what those are specifically so that we can set that up and view that. So let's jump into Davinci Resolve here. So color management, let's go into our project settings and then our color management tab in our settings, and you'll see here at the top we've got a section for color space and transforms. So first thing we need to understand is that the delivery, how we deliver our footage is very different to how we capture our footage. And then usually how we edit our footage, or what sort of color space we're editing within, is either different or most of the time people don't even think about the color space. We just think about how it's captured and how it's delivered. We need to think about all three of these things. So how it's captured, or how was the footage captured, how do we want to edit, and then how do we want to deliver. So within Resolve, we've got, by default, our color stance is set at Davinci YRGB. We also have timeline color space and output color space. But basically, if you're set to Davinci YRGB, what you're telling Resolve is, don't do any color management. Don't do anything at all. I will do everything within the node structure here. So although you think you're sort of telling Resolve to do some things for you, nothing is really happening here. If you're at Davinci YRGB, nothing is happening. Now, if you hit the click down, you've got Davinci YRGB color managed, and then you've got ACES. We're going to stick with Davinci color managed, but the concept is also true for ACES. There's just a slightly different process going on with ACES, but it is still a color managed workflow. So we'll go with Davinci color managed, and I would recommend sticking with Davinci color managed unless you need to use or have a reason to use ACES. So let's click on Davinci color managed. We're going to untick automatic color management. If you're still not sure about how to use color managed, this is sort of a quick and easy way of getting the color managed set up without having to think too much about it. But we're going to untick that, and then we're going to go down to custom. So we're going to have all our available drop downs, and we can select everything we want. So what are we looking at here? We've got our input color space, we've got our timeline color space, and then we've got our output color space. So those are the three main things. There's a lot of other things going on here, but if we get those three things right, then we don't need to worry about anything else. Now, we can change other things to improve the workflow, but those are the three main things: our input color space, our timeline color space, and our output color space. Our input color space is what was captured. So how was the footage captured? So this particular footage that we're working with here was Blackmagic Raw, and it was Blackmagic Film. So I'm gonna go to the select out of the multitude of Blackmagic Design codecs here, or options. It was Blackmagic Design. Where are we? Pocket 4K Gen 4. So that's our input. I know that because I know how the footage was captured, so that's a very important thing to know. And then we've got our timeline color space. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's go to our output color space. We're outputting for web, so it's either going to be Rec 709 2.2 or Rec 709 2.4. Default is 2.4, so I'm just going to go with that. So we've got our input color space. We want to transform that to our output color space, which is Rec 709 2.4. So the Blackmagic Design Film Gen 4 is a massive color space and gamma, and it gives us it captured as a lot of information. Our screens or our displays can't replicate that, so it needs transformed into a color space in gamma that the displays, or most displays, can replicate, which is Rec 709 gamma 2.4. So that's what's happening here. We're just transforming our input transform into our output color space. Now we've got our timeline color space here, so we could leave that as default. The reason we shouldn't leave it at default is because what would happen is we're capturing all this information and immediately we're downgrading it to Rec 709, which is a much smaller color space. So we're getting rid of a load of information before we do our edit or before we do our color grade, which is not what we want. So we want to be working within the biggest color space that we possibly can. Now my default is to change this to Davinci Resolve, Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. So it's a massive color gamut and gamma, and it means that while we're color grading, we are working with the most information that we can. So what's actually happening here? We've got our input color space. We're telling Resolve this is what the footage was recorded on. We're asking it to transform that color space and gamma into Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate while we're color grading. When we're ready for output, then it's going to transform to Rec 709 2.4. The important thing to know or to note is that what we see on our screen is this output color space, but while we're grading, we are working within this timeline color space. So you're not viewing Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, you're viewing Rec 709 because you're viewing the output, you're viewing what's coming out at the end of the workflow, but you're still working within this massive color space, so you have all that room to work with. One other thing to note is we've sort of touched on it a wee bit, but the difference between scene referred and display referred. Anything that's scene referred is really to do with capture. So it's not a color space that you can necessarily view. It's just how you have captured it, or also how you'll color grade, what you'll color grade within. So scene referred is referring to a very large color space in gamma usually, and that's what you'll capture in and that's what you'll color grade in. Display referred is regarding what a display can actually replicate. So Rec 709 is the standard, but you need to know the difference between the two, because we are we're transforming from scene referred to display referred, and that's basically all the process that's happening. We need to tell Resolve, start off here, this is our scene referred color space, and let's end up here at our display color space so that people can actually view it in the way that it should be viewed. So let's hit save and we'll keep an eye on the footage over here. Okay, so that is us done now. Like, that looks alright to me. What that has just done is converted or transformed our footage into what we're viewing is the display referred color space of Rec 709. Now over here in our nodes, when I start moving things around, I'm not moving things around within Rec 709. I'm moving things around within Davinci wide gamut, and that's very important. If we didn't change this timeline color space and we were working within Rec 709, then we have very little information to push around. We've just got rid of most of the scene referred information and went immediately to display referred, and that's not what you want. You want as much information as possible. So here we're working within Davinci wide gamut, but we're viewing the Rec 709 display referred color space. Okay, cool. So that's one way, and I'm just going to check. I'm not sure if anyone will have. This was very short notice, so I'm just going to check if anyone has joined us or questions or anything. Oh, okay. If you do have any questions, do let me know. So let's look at the second way. So I'm just going to turn off my color management, and this is a project level color management. So once you've set this in your project settings, it applies to all of our clips. So you can see it's applied to all of our clips. They're all being transformed, and let's just turn that off. So let's go back to Davinci YRGB, and if you remember, that's basically us saying Davinci Resolve, don't do anything at all. I don't want you to color manage or do anything with my footage. I will sort it out at the node level. So that's us back to our sort of log state or scene referred state. So let's do this in the nodes, and this might make things a wee bit clearer if we're not 100% on what's actually happening here. So we're back to our log state, and we want to set up a node structure. So I'm going to create a couple of nodes here, and the first one I'm going to label as our IDT, and ODT is our final one. So this is going to be our footage, our captured footage, and we need to transform that to our editing or our color grading space. So let's just do that firstly before we get to anything else. So let's go to effects, let's go to color space transform, drop that on the node, and then we have all these options, very similar to our project settings. What we need to put in here is again our input color space and gamma, and that's the main difference. We have these as separate. The color space and gamma are separate. So color space is, as we have already learnt, is pocket 4K film Gen 4. Input gamma is the same. And you see it's already changing, but it's not quite where we need it to be. Output color space is Davinci wide gamut, and the gamma is Davinci intermediate. And that doesn't look great at all. So what have we done so far? We have told Davinci Resolve our input footage, our captured footage, our scene referred footage is Blackmagic Pocket 4K Film Gen 4, and we want to convert that to Davinci wide gamut intermediate. So we've done that, we've got the conversion, but it still looks very loggy. That's because we're still in scene referred. So Davinci wide gamut is still a scene referred, is still a massive color space. What we need to do is at the end of the workflow is convert that to our display referred, so that what we see on our display is what will be seen once it's delivered. So let's go back to our effects. Let's drop another color space transform on our output transform node, and input color space is, and you should know this now, our input color space at this point in the workflow is Davinci wide gamut, because that was the output here. Davinci wide gamut and Davinci intermediate. Output color space is our display referred, so Rec 709 and gamma 2.4. Okay, now we have it on this node, or in this clip, but not on these, because we're working just at the node level. Now, there's multiple ways of doing this. So we could do it clip by clip. For this particular clip, if we did it this way, what we're doing is we have got our input transform, which is transforming our Blackmagic footage into Davinci Wide Gamut. In the middle, or immediately after that, then we can grade. So we're grading within the Davinci Wide Gamut. So we can do our grading within here, and it doesn't really matter how many nodes you're using. At the end of this process, then we're transforming Davinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709. So we're going from scene referred to scene referred here, and then we're going from scene referred to display referred here, and then we're ready to deliver, or it's in a state to deliver. We'll want to do our color grading underneath our output. So hopefully that's making sense. So we've got our footage, we can edit within here. So we're editing within Davinci Intermediate, and there's multiple ways that we can sort of apply this. So we can just copy this sort of node graph onto everything else, all our other clips. Not very not a very good workflow if you've loads of clips. What you can do is just group your clips. So you can see the wee green icon there, they're all grouped now, and instead of putting it at the clip level, you can put it at the pre-clip level, or sorry, we're going to put our IDT at the, get rid of that, and our ODT is going to go at the post, and I just need to get rid of that. So instead of doing it at the clip level or the shot level, across the whole group, I've put an IDT at the start, so it's before the clip level, and then at the post level I've put my ODT, and then the clip level is working within that. So I do my color grade within that, and then that's applied to everything. So that's the way generally I would work. You could also work on the timeline if you wanted to do looks and things like that across all of your clips, but shot by shot. So my main things that I would do are exposure, contrast, and balance, and those would be the three things I do on everything. But the idea of color management is, again, it's not color grading, but it's getting your footage into a really good and healthy state where you should get, when you get to your color grading, you shouldn't actually have to do too much if it was captured well. So you might go to your timeline and do a look for all of your clips, and I'm just going to anchor this here, add a bit of blue, into the shadows, red, anchor same place, add a bit of red in my highlights, and then say that's our look, and that applies to across the range. So once you've got your sort of color management done, you can do your look across all of your clips, and then you can go shot by shot, just working on, you can work on your exposure, and just dial that in to get the setting that you want, contrast, balance. So hopefully that makes sense. Color management is super important. You really need to be color managing your footage if you're serious about color grading. It's an efficient and a robust workflow. So whether that's Davinci color managed or ACES, you should be color managed. It retains the integrity of your footage, gets you off to a good starting point, and ensures that you're editing within the biggest color space that you can. Hopefully this was useful, and very happy to do more in-depth sessions on color management. So do fire us a message if you want more on Resolve, and if you do want anything specific on Resolve, let me know. Okay, great. Have a good evening and a good weekend, everyone.